And so if it's okay with everyone, I'd like to just kind of plow through my slides, and then we can have some interactivity. If I were there in person, I'd be fine with y'all interrupt you, bring questions, whatever. But I think the remote nature of me doing this, it might make more sense just to hang on to your questions until I get to the very end. It won't be that long. Um, excuse me. But first, the pastor in me, I want to make sure that everybody knows that we're going to talk about some heavy stuff. Um, I
I can.
I
Thank
don't
you.
want to fan the flames of anyone's trauma. If you are interested in this work and you'd prefer a one-on-one setting, my contact information is all over the building there somewhere. But do reach out, and I'm happy to connect and learn more about your story if these are issues for you, and find if there's a way that we can invite you into a space of work where you'll feel most comfortable. With that, we're moving on, and I just want to take a minute and say, back in 2021, I presented in this space a little bit about the role faith-based organizations play in helping people around the planet. And they play a critical role. It's more than the actual help that faith-based organizations provide. Uh, the humanitarian relief and development areas of work reflect a billion-dollar industry. And it's all driven by contracts, and much of it is driven by contracts, I should say. And so it's faith-based organizations, though, that don't only shoot for the terms of the contract. The role faith-based organizations play is to reach for the most marginalized in that setting that's not driven always by a moral imperative to do the work. Faith-based organizations do bring that layer of insight and drive and expertise so that we are perpetually reaching for the margins to serve those most vulnerable, to go after that one lost sheep, as the parable is laid out, both in Matthew and in the Gospel of Luke, in the book of Luke. Would someone be willing to read this just so I don't have to hear myself talking for that much longer?
I'll be happy to. Which one of you, having 100 sheep and losing one of them, does not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one that is lost until he finds it? When he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders and rejoices.
Thank you so much for reading that, Carol. Um, you know, in some ways of thinking, this is attributed to a passage that upholds the idea of proselytizing and conversion. In my world, it's really about going after the least of these and trying to find where those people who are most marginalized are, the most shut out, the most vulnerable in the systems that we uphold as human beings. And so that's why I want to bring you Joel's story as a way to get into the understanding more about what EMFERD does, how EMFERD was started, and what it envisions doing in the world. One day, my friend Josephine Bakhtaran, who was a Tanzanian social worker, was walking between villages on a dusty path not unlike this one. And her job was to connect people to services. And as she was walking this dusty path, she was all alone and she heard a baby crying. And when she stepped off the path and began to look and see the source of this crying, she parted this thicket, and there she found Joel as a baby. Joel had been abandoned. And in this part of the world and across most of the post-colonial context in developing countries, disability is not just a burden. It's not just viewed as a burden. It's seen as a reflection for wrongdoing or a punishment from some higher being for sin created in this generation or in generations past. And so it's very common for mothers to be persuaded to kill their infant children who are born with a disability. There are two main ways that this is taking place across much of sub-Saharan Africa and Asia. The first is to have a slip and a fall, either while doing the wash or taking a bath in a local stream, and the baby's released into the water to drown. The other is abandonment, like Joel's story, be placed in a thicket and devoured by carnivores when they start to hunt at night. Oh. So infanticide did not die out with Pharaoh. Mama knew this. She was born and raised in this area of Tanzania, and something just clicked in her. And so, as you might have guessed, Mama brought Joel home. Now, Joel was a baby when she found him, and here he is now as a 14-year-old. This was a picture that she sent me last week. And, we could do a whole separate adult ed on disability theology. But it begins with the primary purpose that disability is not a reflection of sin. It is a reflection of God's immense diversity. And that people who are born with disabilities, you might have a framing that pits them as being less than or being restricted somehow, but they still do have capacity, even if it's just being able to lay there and breathe. Joel can do much more. I have been in the room with Joel when his infectious giggle and laughter and smile can light up a room. I watched a room full of strangers become no strangers no more, largely because Joel was there. He has a humanizing effect with anyone he encounters. Here's Joel receiving physical therapy from my friend Dietrich, who has stepped into the executive director role at EMFERD. We could say more about that a little bit. Mama has found so many children like Joel that she just welcomed in and began a new ministry to accompany these individuals as they grow up, children with disabilities who have been abandoned. She tries to provide them services and support, and she does this in the name of her son, Eric. EMFERD stands for the Eric Memorial Foundation for the Education and Rehabilitation of the Disabled. And this is the last photo that Mama has of her son, Eric. He's there in the blue shirt in the middle. He was born with cerebral palsy and died at age 30 from complications from his disability. And so she does this work in the place of her greatest pain of losing a child, and losing a child who has disabilities that where other people would have abandoned them or walked away from the situation. So she knows all too well what it's like to have a child with a disability living in a country like Tanzania. She's found dozens of abandoned children that she's welcomed into two facilities. One is in Morogoro, Tanzania, and one is in Muvermo, Tanzania. But her work has evolved from just offering shelter and protection to one of accompaniment and empowerment. She has a vision for helping people living with disability to find their unique gifts and apply those gifts in the world. But she knew that that wasn't going to be enough. She knew that she needed to lean into that space of trying to stop the challenge of abandonment in the first place, or to put it as the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu has often said, she needs to go upstream and stop the reason why all those children are falling in the first place. She needed to take on head on this idea that disability is a punishment for sin, or that disability is somehow contagious. So many children that she's encountered have been born with just a smile and a laugh as their capacity to give. And she felt compelled to give them a shot at life, even though they may have been born with a physical or an intellectual disability in a place where they weren't valued. But they are pushed to the margins, and they're kept there by this view of sin and punishment and contagion. And so she knew she needed to find a way to redefine disability as a punishment for sin in her unique context, answering to the primary faith traditions in her area, which are pretty evenly split between Christianity, Islam, and animist pastoralist religions that are usually associated with nomadic tribes like the Maasai. EMFERD's board is intentionally interfaith for this reason, because they want to tackle head on the idea of disability as a form of punishment from God. I describe it as a theological aberration that must require a theological response. The work of faith, working with local faith leaders to enact change, though, is not new. It's actually based in sound public health practice. I do not have a master's in public health. I would take contention a little bit with how I've been described as a health worker in this space. I'm not. I'm a humanitarian. The public health folks, if there are any in the room, my apologies for that, because you have a wonderful discipline and I learn much from you all. But public health folks have long worked with faith leaders to enact social change. Some examples are places like stopping the spread of malaria, promoting the use, using or promoting clean water and hand washing as a form of sanitation, HIV and AIDS testing. There have been many, many programs that have tapped into the reach faith communities have deep into communities, places where other actors will not have nearly the amount of influence and depth to bring about social change. And so Mama took this page from the humanitarian public health playbook and has come up with a way to engage faith leaders in all traditions, all of her three primary traditions around her, to combat the idea of sin. They hold workshops, they invite faith leaders in, they feed them lunch, and they go through a course where it's not only changing the individual faith leaders' perception of disability, they're also giving them resources in how to talk to people in their community about disability, and that this is a reflection of God's diversity. It is not a disease we're trying to stop, if you will. But she's gradually, as they walk those dusty paths in Tanzania, changing minds and doing work that I really don't know of another organization on the continent tackling this notion of sin as a punishment from God head on. And so I think it's cutting edge work, frankly. And it's because it involves a theological locus, like I said, a theological aberration. Most mainline NGOs aren't going to touch it. I call it the faith cooties. They don't want to deal with anything around a faith tradition, even though we know that faith communities and faith leaders have a tremendous way to impact and influence social change. It's groundbreaking work, frankly, and I think it's work that faith-based organizations specifically must take on because the mainline NGOs won't touch it. This is not, though, the end of EMFERD's work. The fallout from seeing disability as a punishment from God has a compounding effect on young girls. And so as we look at this last area, I want to introduce you all to that EMFERD is trying to tackle. I think it's best viewed through the story of my friend Berta. Here she is, just outside the orphanage compound in Mavermo, Tanzania. I met her when she was 17. When she was 13 years old, her parents pulled her out of school when her younger brother was born with a disability. And that's pretty common. The first, most pressing need is for the girl to help the mother care for the child with a disability, because the care requirements may be that intense. But the longer term challenge is that this is a part of the world where child marriage is still very much a reality. And so many families will seek to marry off their child daughters and the child with a disability to ensure that they have long-term care. It comes from a place of caring, but what it ultimately does is it robs this young girl of her promise and potential, not to mention the promise and potential of the individual born with a disability. Berta wants to be a social worker, just like Josephine Bakhtaran, her hero, her mentor. But she wouldn't have gotten that chance if Josephine and EMFERD didn't step into this place where girls need help. And so this is the third area that EMFERD is really trying to make a difference in. They welcome girls who have been pulled out of school and face child marriage and their siblings with disability as a way to provide them shelter and protection and to help them complete their schooling. All the while working with the family, if that's possible, to make sure that the familial unit is still sound and connected. Just to wrap up before we begin some dialogue, this has to be work that's done by some sort of faith-based enterprise. It's not just that we are reaching for the most marginalized, that one sheep against the 99. It's also that faith-based organizations have this imperative to do that reach, but also the know-how to work with local faith leaders in order to reach deeply into communities and enact social change. Most humanitarian organizations would see this as add-on, and frankly, we have a long way to go until we reach that place of what I call, or what is known as, disability inclusive development. A lot of organizations will just build wheelchair ramps to a latrine and call that disability work. The problem is you can't do disability work at the scale needed to justify it as a humanitarian enterprise. So it's seen as an add-on because you can't just build a wheelchair ramp and call it inclusive development. Disability work is a hard challenge and proposition to perform at scale because it's so individualized. Finally, again, this is work that most other groups won't tackle because it treads into this theological water where they don't have expertise, and frankly, they're not interested in trying to tackle this work. It has to be done by a faith-based organization, and specifically people of faith who feel called and led to support the least of these. Right now is a really, really good time to think about partnering with EMFERD. You heard me mention my friend Dietrich Chusey has taken the reins as executive director. Some of this is because Mama really does want to be out in the field, connecting with families and faith leaders. She also says she's getting too old to manage everything on her own, and frankly, the program is growing. This is an organization that is positioned to make an incredible difference, and I think that we could develop tools and resources through EMFERD and methodologies that could be used in other organizations in other countries, while remaining sensitive to a local context. And really, they're searching for a true partner. I've talked with Josephine Bakhtaran over the years, and yes, they need financial assistance. There's no question about that, but that's not really their want. They really want a partner, someone who will vision and grow with them, someone who will remain committed to them. And it's an opportunity for a congregation, a group of congregations to come together and sit with the most marginalized. And that has a tremendous influence in EMFERD's local context. If Westerners were to come and to sit with those people who most of the times are forgotten, beyond the margin, it has a legitimizing effect of welcoming these people back into community, of demonstrating to their context, the communities in their context, that they have worth and value and aren't dirty, and being a testament through presence, simple presence, that they are God's beloved and worthy of inclusion and belonging. That's powerful. And it's the work that I believe we are called to do as Christ's church. Just to wrap up, in case you didn't know where Tanzania is, where Dar es Salaam is, hopefully this will unpack it for a little bit for you. And I know it feels weird to place a map at the end of the presentation, but I did so intentionally because geography is so very important in all of this. And I'd like to end with a story. My work has served over the last 16, 17 years, has served exclusively faith-based organizations. And I've worked with USAID, other government-driven contracts. And we were servicing a contract to stop the spread of a suite of diseases called neglected tropical diseases. So these are diseases that exist alongside malaria, but also have crippling effects and remain largely underfunded. The organization I served was responsible for administering drugs, tests, preventative care across the whole country of Tanzania to stop the spread of NTDs. And one of the things that drove that exercise was the ability to track everything with GPS, to be able to put a pinpoint and to say, we distributed drugs here, we held testing there, in this place we did this. It's one of the tools used in order to ensure that we're doing the job and administering the program at a scale stipulated by the contract. And so one day I'm riding around in the middle of the country and near a small city called Morogoro. It's the closest city to Mavermo, where EMFERD is based. And I'm talking with the regional project director for this program that we're servicing to stop the spread of these diseases. And I'm telling her about EMFERD. And I asked if she wanted to visit. So I hopped on WhatsApp and I told Mama Bakita, I'm bringing someone by to meet you. We met, we had a wonderful time, showed her the facility and what Mama was trying to achieve. And when we got back in the car, she told me, she said, thank you for showing me this. I had no idea this was here. And she pulled up her iPad and she showed me that they had done work all around EMFERD, but no one told them, no one informed them, you should go down the road and talk to these people and make sure that they have this protection too. No one thought to say, hey, have you reached out to this community down the road? Nobody is there. And I'm not kidding. You could see the pinpoints of where we've enacted programs all around. Henry Nouwen likes to say, or liked to say in his writings and his presentations, that distance allows us to see that other human beings don't matter. Whether it's prisons, whether it's refugees, whether it's people living with disability, if they're out of sight and out of mind, they don't matter to us. And so I'm ending intentionally with geography because I'm utterly convinced that if we can get to a place where we understand that the well-being of a nonverbal, immobile person living with a disability in Tanzania is directly tied to my own well-being, I think the world's going to be a better place. And that's the spirit in which I bring this to you all at Bradley Hills. This is work that makes my heart come alive. This is work that will change the lives of the faces that you see on your screen and many, many others. Each of these people have been told that they don't matter, that they exist and have no relevance to the rest of society because they're viewed as either dirty, a reflection of sin, or let's face it, they're just not productive, that they don't make or do or earn. But I don't think that's the world we are called to create. We can do better. thank you for letting me get through this. Thank you for being interested. Thank you for coming. Even if this is not the work for you, I appreciate your time and the opportunity to share a little more. At this QR code, you can scan it with your phone and it'll take you to, I'm sorry, it's a PDF. We're still working on a website. But it really is a full prospectus of what EMFERD wants to achieve and where those opportunities for partnership exist. And if you want to talk about it, if you want to learn more, there's my contact information on the screen, or you can get it from the church office. So thank you. Happy to take questions.
So much, Matt. I welcome questions from remotely, and if you want to raise your hand or here in the room. I'm wondering myself a couple of things. To what extent, if I know that our church has designated some funding and support through our mission programs, but you're looking for more than that, I would assume. And I'm wondering if you could describe what that would involve. And then the other aspect that I have questions about is, because this is deeply ingrained, I think, sounds like it, as a religious response that folks have to disabilities. Is there, besides helping, actually physically helping these children, is there a way that we can work with religious organizations in any way, or in education? So if you can give us some
Sure.
help.
First of all, let me thank Bradley Hills. The mission committee had approved a $5,000 grant to help rebuild the latrines at EMFERD. So this is an emergency request. It's pretty common for hand-dug latrines across sub-Saharan Africa to collapse, especially under rains. And the climate is changing in Tanzania. It now rains for longer periods of time. And so the latrines just really did implode. And so the grant from Bradley Hills will allow EMFERD to construct more resilient latrines professionally that will pay forward work, existing investment in EMFERD. That existing investment came from Lutheran World Relief. My capstone project for my MDiv was managing a well drilling and electrification project at EMFERD. And so they have plenty of fresh, available clean water now. They have electricity. And now hopefully they'll have better latrines that are more resilient to the changing climate. As far as how to go about lending support as a faith community, I think the first thing is just to go and see. There's I can show you pictures. My friend Greg Brecky, who's a photographer, took most of the pictures that you saw. You can see it, but you can't experience it. And I think having the opportunity to go and visit and experience where EMFERD is and what it's trying to do can speak to the heart and guide the spirit in ways that I can't in a basic, adult ed presentation. And if that's something that Bradley Hills is interested in, I would be happy to coordinate and come along and introduce you all to EMFERD. Philosophically, many faith communities or faith actors are the ones who are leading the way on disability rights and justice. They don't do it necessarily from a pure advocacy point of view, taking to the streets, chanting nothing about us without us. But they do provide an incredible space of validating who people who live with disabilities are as human beings. And so there are organizations right around Bradley Hills and in the greater Washington, D.C. area that do just that. They help build friendships between people who are typically developing like you and me and others who have not had that reflection of human development. Coming into relationship with someone, having a friendship with someone who lives with a disability, is a powerful witness in a world that doesn't always welcome them and frankly often shuts them out. I mean, think about it. I grew up going to public school. Who grew up going to public school? Do you remember where the special education classroom was in your elementary school? Chances are it was at the end of a hallway. You probably never went there. At lunchtime, if they did come to a common cafeteria for lunch rather than being shut in their room, they probably sat at their own table and you never interacted with them. That was my experience. And I've found over the years that this is the experience of many, many, many other people. That othering, that forcing people to the margins is upheld by our systems in innumerable ways. But as we begin to relate with one another on a one-to-one basis, those systems fall away and don't matter as much because you bring the validating effect of human relationship to those engagements.
Yeah.
So there are ways that you can tackle the marginalization of people with disabilities right in your community or alongside a partnership with EMFERD. I hope I answered your question.
Well, I guess that just takes a commitment of someone to make those, to try to reach out to make those connections.
Sure.
I do know that the public school system has changed a lot since we were in it. And to the extent possible, there's a lot more integration, but still it's the and the thing is too, that at least we have more educated people that are educated, but that's not every generation we have to re-educate. So it's a huge commitment on our part. Okay, so I have a question from Alvin in the chat. Is there any governmental support for health-based work in the country, but is it not allowed because of the religious connection there?
It's not as much a situation as it's not allowed as it's just not supported. So Tanzania does have funding for its own health system. There is a government-run health system where, in theory, anyone can come and see a doctor and be treated at a clinic. EMFERD's experience has been, though, that the doctors who run those clinics and who provide care will not treat people with disabilities. The stigma is that entrenched. And so EMFERD has to spend a chunk of its meager resources on purchasing private health insurance with a dedicated provider, even though there is an existing government system. There is some government level disability work going on in Tanzania, but it's not, it kind of mirrors the work of NGOs. It's just an add-on and it's basic solutions. It's not comprehensive solutions or ones that tackle the root causes of stigma and marginalization.
And for the most part, the religious beliefs, is there any hope for change there?
Can you say more, Carol? I don't understand what you're asking.
If the stigma, I mean, I don't know, it seems as if there are Christian churches supporting the stigma. I mean, is there any hope that could change or maybe?
That is the work that EMFERD's doing.
Oh, okay.
They're partnering with faith leaders deep in communities. So I'm talking about imams and pastors who are at the village level, and helping them understand that one, disability is not a punishment for sin, and two, that they have a chance to influence their community in a way that saves lives. And welcomes people with disabilities and provides them care instead of promoting or even, not considering the idea of abandonment as a parent's only option.
comments, questions?
I just have a comment. I pulled up the EMFERD website
Yes.
and the gallery
Oh,
there.
I
has some-
wanted to ask a question.
Wait, just if you could, just wait, one moment, we've got a question here.
No, it's-
Okay,
it's just-
go ahead.
Okay, just hold on, let's go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, if you pull up the EMFERD website, which I did on my phone here, there's some amazing pictures in the gallery there. And I know he said, you know, pictures are different than actually being there, but if you look at those pictures, they are amazing.
Yeah, can you hear what Patty
Mhm.
just said? That the IMFER
Yeah, the website, if you go on the
has,
website to the gallery, and it's got
the gallery has.
some amazing pictures.
Yeah, Venus, what is your question?
Yeah, mine was actually connected with what you were talking about in terms of the faith-based healers. Because I wondered, is the idea that it's a punishment or it's from sin, is that from earlier Christian teachings? Is that a cultural issue? What are we talking about here?
It's all of the above, and I can tell you it is not just unique to this part of Tanzania. I have sat with people caring for people with disabilities all over the world, and this sentiment is not one that is just Christian alone. It is pervasive in Muslim, the Muslim faith tradition. It's pervasive in even Buddhist traditions in South Asia. It's everywhere. I think there's, and I don't want to be so bold as to say every religion has some version of this, but there is the idea of having a God who wields punishment when we do wrong, is a theological, I would call it a theological aberration. That's not the God that I know and love and serve. And it is more a reflection, I think, of our brokenness as human beings than it is of any deity.
Okay, I think my question was, did Christianity perpetuate this idea
Mhm.
in that area?
Absolutely.
Oh.
Clint, did you have a question?
Matt, this is a bit off the topic, but I think of interest. I'm sure you spend a lot of time in country, and I wondered if you had seen recently any evidences of accelerated malnutrition. We have a project in Congo, a small village. We laughingly say 18 hours and 2 flat tires east of Kinshasa. And they've got some extraordinarily rich soil there. And last few months, we've gotten reports of malnutrition, which is unique in our experience there. And I wondered if this is a wider phenomenon than just this village.
Oh, yes. I mean, so there are a number of forces driving malnutrition rates. One of the organizations I served within the last 5 years had a comprehensive malnutrition program reaching up towards the DRC and the central part of the continent. But they're seeing malnutrition rates exacerbated by flooding and other things that displace people from their homes. It's not a Congo thing. It's not a Tanzania thing. It is a humanity thing. So yes, malnutrition is pervasive in this part of the world.
Other questions?
Karen?
Yes.
Okay. So in my experience, I think people who have a lot of different disease processes going on, not just disabilities, physical and mental, view them as a punishment from God. Is that your experience in Tanzania as well? What if somebody comes down with cancer, or do they not even have, the medical wherewithal to deal deal with the diagnosis?
You know, my experience is I would say all perspectives are true but partial, right? And my experience is the same. It's in my experience in that part of the world, yes, I have heard women who have contracted cervical cancer say they believe it's a punishment from God from doing X. It's not a phenomenon that's rooted just in disability work. It's, you know, it's any kind of pervasive illness, certainly any kind of terminal illness. This same framing seems to come into play.
And here as well in the United States.
Well, sure.
Absolutely.
Well, sure.
We had another question. Can you tell us more about the trips that have been taken by other faith-based groups to EMFERD? What kinds of activities can participants take part of? Is there a possibility that we could join groups as they make trips?
Sure. So they haven't hosted any groups from the United States yet. This is very much a ground floor exercise. Just so you all know, I'm talking with 2 or 3 other congregations where I have relationships and trying to build together a bevy of partners who can accompany EMFERD on this initial journey of partnership. The first step really would be to go and to learn in a visioning trip. And I'd be happy I'm trying to pull something like this together for within the next year to 18 months. The idea is that from that visioning trip, the opportunities for service will become clearer. And it could be that I don't want to dictate it. In other words, I want the Spirit to move. I want it to play to people's gifts. I want it to play to people's interests. And to leave plenty of space for that. You know, EMFERD, if it can find the right partners, I think it's absolutely a sustainable model and organization. But finding the partners is now the critical component. And so it's really an opportunity for those congregations that feel called and led to do this work to step in and help shape it. I could see EMFERD hosting volunteers from congregations. I could see joint opportunities for worship. I could see, you know, whatever form it takes. I think the possibilities are all there. It's up to us to discern what they are.
Any comments? You know, just before we started, Rosanna Howard, who's our interim Christian education director, came in. We were trying to brainstorm ways that our programming here could join and be more intergenerational. And there was a time when this church had a big focus on reaching out to folks, children and with disability. And we had a range of programs, and she seems to have a vision that perhaps we could look at that. And the world that we live in now, since that time, the diagnosis is so much wider than we realized. And then we're all, as we'll see our speaker next week, is going to be talking about what has happened since COVID within congregations. So perhaps, if we could designate the people that have this, would like to reach out and do something about this. I mean, I was shocked when I talked to you, Matt, earlier in the week, that about the religious component of this, but then when I thought back, when I was young, very young, a long time ago, I can remember people really kind of did wonder if people, the fact that their children had disabilities, if that wasn't a punishment that God had. I mean, this is prevalent here and probably still is on some level. So I do think there's a possibility that there's some hope, and perhaps, as we stay in touch with you and you find, because it could well be that we once again develop more of an expertise, so to speak, that this is a possibility for us.
Sure, sure. I mean, I think that's a wonderful place of need to step into. I mean, I can tell you from my experience, my son Noah lives with autism. He was diagnosed at age 3.5. And of course, that experience has contributed to my trajectory in ministry in wonderful ways. But having the welcome of your faith community and the assurance, especially in those early days, that things are going to be okay and that you're not alone, is a powerful witness of compassion. Full stop. I mean, it made a tremendous difference in the lives of our family. And so I'm excited to see, maybe that is a place Bradley Hills could step into. And building partnerships around that, to include things like EMFERD and other ways. There's tremendous need there.
Our congregation does have connections in Africa for sure. I mean, and we've got outreach in Uganda. Clint Kelly is here working with Carl Plotz. But for me, it's a little scary thinking about the travel. Could you tell us a little bit about what your experience has been in making the trips and actually reaching out and going there so people can understand how this can work?
Sure. Happy to share more. So, the idea would be to fly to Dar es Salaam. It's the biggest international airport close to where Mavermo is. And to have I would give yourself a day or two of rest, frankly, because that's a hell of a journey. I've done it many times. In Dar es Salaam is an interesting place. It's becoming a more cosmopolitan city. There are places you can stay right on the Indian Ocean. There are great restaurants, all of that. And then once there's been a day or two of recovery, it's about a 4 to 5 hour highway ride to a city called Morogoro. And that's where the hotel is that you would stay in. And it's a hotel that caters to international travelers. It has internet. It has a restaurant on site. They make a good pizza. And I'll tell a tale on my wife. My wife's idea of camping is a hotel without room service. I would be comfortable taking my wife to this hotel. I'm sorry, she'll kill me for saying that, but I'm trying to say, like, it's not a bad place to be. And then the village where EMFERD is based is maybe an hour north of Morogoro. So you would just shuttle back and forth. Eventually, the vision is to have a space where they could welcome groups to live there, to stay there. That's not the case right now. So it would involve some car travel. But I think it's doable. I've convinced my wife to go there at some point in the future. And it's a trip I'd happily take her on. My mother wants to go. My mother is in her mid-70s, and just had 2 knees replaced. So she's willing to go, and I think she could do it. So it's not like who was the gentleman who said it's a 14-hour and 2 flat tire car ride out of Kinshasa. It's not that bad. It's fairly doable. I don't know if that answers your question or not, if that's the kind of insight you're looking for. We could also arrange a video introduction to some of the folks with EMFERD if that's of interest. that would take place not out in Mavermo, but in Morogoro, where they also have a facility. I could check into something like that if you all would like to actually talk to the people from EMFERD, and get to know them a bit.
Kathy?
Well, I think, I guess as someone who doesn't see that trip for herself in the future, I think there are also things to do at home, as Matt has suggested, even thinking of our own children in this church. And having been a Sunday school teacher before and, recently, there are children that may not be obvious disabilities, but they do have challenges. And I think helping us to realize that's not bad behavior, that they are experiencing the world differently and that we may need to respond to them differently or structure their environment differently. I think there's always more we could do as a church community.
As a church, just to educate ourselves. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And the wider reach. I know, I was just thinking, I went to a birthday party for a 1-year-old last week. And one of the neighbor kids seemed to be very destructive. And I found out afterwards that he's autistic, that this is a challenge. So, so we do have a lot of work that we can do within ourselves, intergenerationally and abroad. So, yeah. But these kids that you're talking about are particularly, yes, we really appreciate that time. Other comments and questions? Appreciate this. Well, next week, and this does sound, these are serious topics, but I guess we're living in serious times, and if we don't address some of these openly and honestly, we're not ready for them. So next week we have coming Reverend Dr. Lynn Hedges-Gattell, who will be talking about identifying, addressing, and healing collective trauma experiences by church congregations. The pandemic alone, we're all living with significant trauma from the pandemic. And there are many events that can affect clergy as well as lay people. And Lynn has a background that really has prepared him to work with congregations to understand this and to actually help heal individuals as well as congregations. And he's been in high demand, and we're very fortunate that he is donating his time to us. Next week, he's a good friend of Steve Fox's and will be staying and joining us in person. And I have a feeling that we all have questions about this, and we could learn a whole lot about how our faith really can serve us, but also within our own faith communities. Can this happen? It does. And it's the pandemic has been particularly, challenging to church congregations. So I think it'll be a very interesting session. And we welcome your spreading the word and coming back. We really appreciate your time, Matt, and not to forget EMFERD, and this information is available. If anybody wants to contact me, I can contact Matt, first of all. You're the person, but any of us can spread the word, and we'll be looking for more opportunities.
Or Rebecca Lou. She has been a stalwart advocate, and can connect you to me as well. So thank you to Rebecca for that.
Yeah, Rebecca, are you with us right now? Did you want to say anything? No, she has been with us.
Yeah, hi, I don't know if you can hear me. I am here. And, I was put in touch with Matt through Denise, and, Bradley Hills has a personal history with Matt. I guess I would just say, I think that Bradley Hills, strikes me as a congregation with a heart for really putting our feet, well, putting into action what we believe in. And I know that collectively, we do have a heart for protecting the most vulnerable. So I just felt that Matt's work with EMFERD, even though it seems far away, as Matt says, philosophically, biblically, it's a match for us. So I'm really excited to see what partnerships we can grow with Matt. And yes, I'm happy to continue to the extent I can be helpful, facilitate any kind of, maybe like we talked about, perhaps a online introduction to EMFERD and Mama Bagita. We'll take it from here. But yeah, I'm personally just excited to see how this partnership might grow.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Well,
Thank
and,
you all. I greatly appreciate your time and do wish I was there in person. I hope you have a wonderful worship service.
well, we look forward to continuing the.
Please be in touch.
Thank you. Yes, we will stay in touch. Thank you, man. Thanks so much.
Oh, yeah. I felt
Thank
that.
you all. Be well.
You too.
Bye.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
I don't know what we're gonna do about feeding everybody.
Yeah.
We never had a report from this village and we always have abundance. Their population is growing. 3 out of